I swear, if I knock this over and spill it everywhere, that's gonna be just like the death.
That'll be a really good bit.
Really good bit, right,
Yeah.
right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jarod Lau. For those of you who are new, welcome back to all returning viewers, subscribers alike. Super fortunate to be joined by...
Hi, I'm ChiWen Chang.
And today we'll be drinking coffee from...
Mother Tongue Coffee.
Mother Tongue Coffee, thank you. And if you're curious as to how we got this far and see how much coffee I spilled in the process, please check out the video of us making the coffee below. But getting right into it, to this episode of the Our Cup Coffee Chat series, where we sit down and just talk about things over coffee. So tell the world about you.
Hello world. So my name is ChiWen. I am an artist. I went to art school. I moved to New York about 5 years ago to study acting, and I have a BFA now in theater, but I also work as a barista, and I also do administrative work for a dance company, so I dabble, but mostly I identify as an actor and a dancer.
So what inspired you to get into, dancing, the musical arts? Like, is there a particular moment, or somebody that you saw, inspiration, just like, or how did you end up on this path?
Well, I was performing when I was very, very young, which is the case for a lot of girls. Was like in dance class when I was a kid, but then I stopped because my family moved around a lot, and I didn't start performing again until the middle of high school, which is rather late to rediscover or discover for the first time a passion. It was kind of a perfect timing of being in high school and like being really quiet and shy, and then like finding this thing that makes you feel like, oh, actually this is kind of cool. I feel kind of good about myself
right.
like the first time.
It's like, here's my voice, here's how I can express myself, right?
Yeah. It was kind of me coming out of my shell and realizing, oh, like, actually, when I'm on stage, I am not scared of everyone, but being myself, I'm scared of everyone. So it's like, oh, if I'm pretending, then it's not really me.
Right, and there's a lot of fun in that, and hopefully the arts have been a fun journey for you.
Yeah, coming to New York definitely changed how I see things in terms of the type of work that I want to make. I think when I was living, I grew up in Southeast Asia, attending American and British schools. My idea of what I would be doing when I moved to New York City was like, I'm just gonna audition to be on TV. I want to be on Broadway, like all the fun jazzy stuff. And then once I moved here and started watching a lot of theater, I was like, oh wow, like this is so different. There's like a lot of wacky things happening, and that feels right. Like that feels more special. And I think that's something very precious about the art scene in New York, where it's like, I can't really describe perfectly what it's like to see a piece of downtown experimental theater to someone who's like, oh, like, do you want to be in The Lion King?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like definitely a little bit more of a nuanced in a more intimate space.
Yes.
Because these smaller theaters, even the Broadway theaters, they are a lot smaller than I think one would think. And there's a lot, I think, honestly prefer it that way, because that way you can really kind of connect with a performer. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The experience is totally different depending on what space you're in, depending on the people. The energy changes all the time. I remember when I said that I wanted to do theater, specifically live theater over like film and television, I had a lot of people ask me like, isn't it boring to do the same thing every night? Like if you're doing a show on Broadway, like you're doing the same show 8 or 9 times a week, but it's always different actually because it's live, it's happening in the moment. The people in the room, the energy is always different. You're sharing a moment and an experience with a group of people, so it's never gonna be the same thing unless you like clock out and are just doing it like a robot. In that case, why are you doing it?
Right. Because it's like the people who genuinely love the art form and are about the process, like they understand that, and it's not even like a factor. From some of the people that I've talked to, they're just like, you know what, it's an opportunity, and each night should be different. Even if it's the same material, there's opportunity to, change, spice it up.
Yeah, and whether it's like something like a funny accident happens on stage and that's something for you and your team, your castmates to share and giggle about, or it's like a little something that you just like tell yourself before the show that you're gonna focus on, something to cherish about being able to do your work it's an artistic exchange, whether people are using it as entertainment or an escape or to to have a nice moment.
Right. Right. Just an evening for the people who maybe aren't sure what they're looking for, but just looking to try something new and have that experience.
Yeah.
So along that line, what's been like the craziest thing that's happened on stage? Like, has there been like any
that
kind of like, whether that you've heard about, experienced, heard from other people, just like what has like that like if there's been like a crazy accident or something like that, or like that whole kind of show must go on moment,
A lot of the crazy stuff is like I feel like there's always rumors about ghosts that live in theaters, and like whenever something falls down, it's like, oh, it's the ghost. Like
that's such a thing. That's such a thing.
When there's this one theater in the school that I attended that always had accidents, and it involved a lot of head injuries, and it was just like things like falling or like something not being secure, which you can blame on like one person not checking, but it's also like people like to like speculate. It's like, oh, it's the ghost. It's like, what's gonna happen? It's the ghost. There are a lot of like suspicions.
Right.
Even saying like break a leg, that kind of thing. I don't know if I've ever been in anything crazy. I feel like the hardest thing I've had to do on stage was I was in a scene and I was supposed to be frozen. I wasn't supposed to be moving. I was sitting down like this or something, and then my calf started cramping up, and I wasn't supposed to move for another like 10 minutes. And I was like, oh, great. So I just like I like glared into the wall, and I was like kind of flexing my foot and like moving my toes, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna shed a tear or not, like what's gonna happen. I made it through. It was fine. I didn't move.
Wow.
I just cried after the show.
It's like I was just sitting in excruciating pain.
I was like pressing my leg into the leg of the chair and trying to like
maintain
roll it
composure.
a tiny bit. Yeah.
That's crazy.
But it's still not like the worst thing that could happen. I feel like if you had to like throw up or like.
Yeah, that would be that would be bad.
But
wow.
It happens.
Kind of reeling it back in though, grinding coffee, right.
Hand grinder.
To a very kind of relevant, I think, topic right now in just arts, entertainment, even presidential elections, in the sense of just lack of Asian representation. And I don't know what your experience is on that, and I would love to hear about your experience as not only just being an Asian American just trying to make it into a scene that is predominantly Caucasian. So.
Yes, I do have things to say.
I very much look forward to hearing the tea, or in this case, the coffee.
Here's the coffee. I really, I think, come from a place of privilege because I was brought up around people who look like me. I attended international schools, but I grew up in Asia from the age of like 6 to 17. So it really didn't occur to me how I knew that there was like a problem with diversity, because like there's all the Hollywood content that we get over there is all white, straight, until I got to school and I was like, oh, I'm the only fully Asian girl in my class of 65 people. In my particular training, what's it called? Conservatory. And then realizing, oh, there aren't really like many parts for me to play, or if I do play the parts, it's like, oh, it's so subversive. It's so different for me to speak the words that were written for a 50-year-old white man. It's like, oh, like now it's like, what are we saying by casting her, a woman of color, in a white man's role? When I was like, oh, I thought I was just playing the character. It's like, oh, it changes a lot of things to speak words that were written for someone who is not you. which can be very fascinating. It is very interesting, and it's done a lot in experimental work like gender bending, race bending, because it does prove a point about the type of text, the words that we use for the people that are currently holding the spots up.
Right.
I saw my first fully Asian cast play at my theater company. It was called House Rules, and it was about a cultural and generational gap between immigrant Asian parents. I believe it was a Filipino family and children who do not speak Tagalog or have broken communication with the parents, and the only like shared understanding of culture besides skin and blood is food. And I was like, relatable. Right. I think as the children of immigrants, there's a lot that I appreciate and cherish, but also there's a big disconnect just because I did not grow up the same way my parents did. There are a lot of things I take for granted, but there's a lot of stuff that I feel now responsible and accountable for, of like, knowing your roots, going back to your roots, because also being one of the only Asian women in my immediate group of friends and peers at school, there was a lot of like, what do you think about this situation in Asia, or like about Asian people? And I was like, I'm speaking for everyone. Like, you're asked, like, right. I have an opinion, but I am by no means an expert. But it also motivated me to get a little more educated on what it means, because I was like, I guess people are going to be asking me these questions, so I better have something smart to say. Because otherwise that gives them a reason to be like, well, like, you don't know what you're talking about, so like, why do we want you at the table? Yeah, and that's a very frustrating and kind of ignorant position to take, you know? Yeah, and I think it's true for a lot of people of color, where it's like, you're expected to work this much harder, put in this many more hours to be in the same place as someone else. Right, because that's the thing, is it's like there's the standard, that there's the norm. You have to fight to not only meet the norm, but then you have to excel above that to, beat the very competitive field. Yes. So it's, a tremendous disadvantage and obstacles that it's tough. Fortunately, progress is being made, hopefully, slowly but surely. I think so, yeah. Because diversity is such like a buzzword right now, like everyone's like, but is there diversity in the show? Especially on TV and in movies. A lot of people are advocating for it, but at the same time, I think there's something very tricky about diversity versus tokenism. Right, absolutely. If we make diversity a thing of like, you must have a diverse cast of creative and performing people, because it's important not to just have the people on screen, but also your writers, your designers. It's the whole thing. What does it mean to have like a checklist? Like, do you actually put a number of like, you need this many people of this many genders, races, and then what does it mean if you become a statistic that way? Right. But is that a step we have to take in order to just like get people into the room? Right. It's like it's I'm getting heated now. No, I mean, it's a very real thing, because it's been, an obstacle that has been in place beyond, prior to us, and is like, like you said, trying to find that genuine change, that genuine place where you're right, it's not tokenism, it's not just doing diversity for diversity's sake, like letting there be like a genuine environment where it's like there's truly equal opportunity. Yeah. And it's getting to that point is going to be tough, because for as long as these institutions have been in place, this is kind of just the way it's been going for almost a century. A long time. Yeah. And something else that I've thought about along these lines is, I think it's important to have stories told of tragedy, or of like the pain of immigration, the specific stories that belong to specific ethnicities and cultures, so that other people, white people, have a chance to peer into what that life is like. Right. But also, I think part of normalizing and actually having real diversity is just to have more people of color, people across genders, across abilities, just on screen playing normal characters, because that is what normal life looks like. Not all over America, but in New York City certainly, by making it just like a character instead of like, oh, this person was like raised this way and like had such a horrible childhood.
Right.
Like just a normal person. Just by having someone who is a person of color.
Just like, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the point. Yeah. right. Diversity and that inclusion doesn't have to be showcasing the extremes of the race. Like, I think one of the examples is Crazy Rich Asians, which is a great film. Enjoyed it, but it kind of very much still played into the extremes, the stereotypes, doesn't demonstrate Asian people as normal, if you will. Yeah, as an entirety. It's very much a hyperbolic.
I think a lot of people also, sorry to interrupt.
No, you're totally fine.
A lot of people are both excited and angry by the idea of something like Crazy Rich Asians because it's like, oh, it's the first film in, how long was it? Like 50 years?
Yeah.
It has a full Asian cast. And then having suddenly now all these expectations. It's like, oh, since it's the first Asian film, it has to have this.
Right.
And then being upset when like all these things are not represented. The film is called Crazy Rich Asians. I think it is true to the Crazy Rich Asian story.
Right.
Which isn't the story of all Asians. It just happens to have a full Asian cast, which is great. It's one step forward.
Right.
But it's not like, oh, we're suddenly there. Like, it's
right.
not.
Absolutely.
It's the door creaking open, but that doesn't mean that the room is full.
Right, because it's like the key will be eventually like that point when everyone's just kind of on the ground level. Like everybody, like you said, just normal roles doesn't have to be this extreme thing where it's just happening. It's not even a thought. Like that's whenever like truly be achieved is when we're not even thinking about diversity. It just naturally happens.
Yeah.
So.
Which is like colorblind, but also you should acknowledge that these people are of different backgrounds.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's like the thing is we're not there yet, so we can't like talk to that point yet because we're not there. That will come in time, but I think these hyperbolic approaches are definitely knocking on the door, which is I think a good step. And like you said earlier, it's like these could be the necessary steps that need to be taken to get there. It's just tough.
It's tough.
it's just tough.
But we're working on it.
That's
what matters.
Right. Like I think right now they're just like Yang Gang 2020. It's like I think that's ultimately it starts at the top. You know, not to get political here because we want to talk about arts, but it's like
arts
and politics. Yeah, arts is very political, and I think it starts there because it's like you look at the Democratic field, like the Republican field is like Trump and just a bunch of other Caucasian white people. Not a bad thing, just is. But it's like, and then you see the Democratic pool where it's just like only a few people of color, and then all the front runners are white, and they're talking to they're trying to talk on behalf of diversity, but it's like it's tough trying to find a genuine place to create genuine change, to create a genuine environment.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say that this doesn't mean like no more white people doing anything. It just means like listen to the people around you, just take in your community a little bit more. I think a great way of being an ally is just to make friends with people who are not like you, to talk and engage with these people more, to invite them to advise you or listen to the things that you feel maybe you're not sure about. Or you're like, oh, I don't know if that's right. I don't know if my opinion is the only opinion.
Right.
Which is, I think, helpful, and I think because people that are straight and white do usually have more power, that's a way to help a friend out, where it's like, oh, actually, I need your advice on this one thing, and allowing for input from a different perspective, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. You answered what was going to be my next question before. I was gonna be like, what could we do?
Gotcha.
And you just nailed it. Just politely ask questions.
Yeah.
You know, because that's
so it's an example would be having a straight white person write a story that is about an immigrant family. It's great that you're making that happen, but it's not really your story. If it ends up being the thing that you must do because you were the one who was hired, and it's like they're not going to do the show unless you write it,
right,
then have a person of color, have a few people of color come into the writer's room and help you out so that you have some genuine, authentic voices that are still being heard. And it's not you colonizing the story.
I mean, that's just what it is. I mean, that's just what it is.
If you know you have the power, there are ways that you can distribute it or just open the space up. Open your ears, open your heart. That's all.
I love it. So how has the work-life balance been in New York? Kind of changing a slight gear.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the very real things that people face is, especially for those who are studying art right now, considering it professionally, trying to figure out a rough time. There's no timelines when it comes to this kind of stuff. But as far as like the trajectory, because it's like we're gonna study and there's gonna be a point where we're gonna graduate, and perhaps there's gonna be the lucky few that land something right out of school. But for you and I and a lot of others, it's like we're still working towards what that opportunity is gonna be, or opportunities that may not necessarily yield financial independence, but artistic fulfillment. Like, how do you balance work, life, progress? Do you have any tips to that? What is your really a lot of questions, but really just opening the floor to what has your experience been with work life artistic balance.
It's definitely very difficult. I won't sugarcoat it, and I am lucky that I met a lot of people who were very real with me when I first got here. I had a class in university called Salon, which was every Friday at 1 p.m. We had a professor bring downtown theater artists, established New York City downtown theater artists, in to talk with us, like a casual interview, and then we got to do like a little Q&A after, and we always asked like, what's the advice you would give to your 18-year-old self, like that kind of thing. It was very enlightening, not only in hearing the artistic processes of other artists who have been in the game for longer, but also hearing like the real shit of like, oh, it's gonna be really hard, and you have to know that you want it, which was enough to kind of scare a few, like freshman year. And this happens in a lot of art schools. Like a lot of people just drop the major, they switch major, they're like, I'm gonna do liberal arts, or like I'm gonna do the financially secure thing, which I think is fair. It's not to shame those people at all, but it is something that you have to know for certain, and you have to feel very strongly about in your heart and your mind, because it is very challenging.
Absolutely.
Especially in a city as ruthless as New York. I think it's actually, like, if you decide that you don't want to do it or are having doubts, that's okay. It's hard to force yourself to commit to something if you are doubting it. After freshman year, and I know that's still the very beginning of college, I was quite certain. I was like, oh, hearing all these experiences of people who struggled financially or just had shitty experiences, bad experiences, working with certain theaters, certain groups of people, knowing like, oh, this is something I want to fight for. You don't need to set, I think, technical or like logistic rules for yourself in terms of like, I will only do this, but you need to know that there are limits to what you are able to do physically, mentally, emotionally, and be okay with like starting to set boundaries. And I think that's something that even now I'm adjusting the lines of what feels okay, and now that I've done a good body of work in New York, being like, okay, actually I don't have to say yes to everything. This is kind of what I want to do, but not at the expense of me getting this much sleep a night.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we still have to be functional, Because it's like, or else you spread yourself too thin, you do too many things, and they don't necessarily go so well, and that'll end up closing doors down the future. Or as opposed to, like you said, balancing, not saying yes to everything, but saying yes to what your limit is, and that way you can do it to the ultimate best of your ability.
Yeah.
And you're not missing out on some of the more, trivial parts of your life that you have to take care of.
Yeah. I do think there's a time that it's good to say yes to everything, to try all these different things. And I don't believe that time is over for me either, but I think I've done a period of that. And I'm like, okay, now it's time to take a break, and not take a break, to focus in on like the specifics of what those things are to me, instead of just being like, yep. Because I have a feel of what I want to pursue right now. I think it's also important to mention that there is an awful stereotype of like the dysfunctional, like deranged artist, especially in New York. And that I know that the school that I was in, a lot of us joked about it, like, haha, I'm trash, like, haha, like, and like the drinking, smoking, that kind of thing, which is all like a stereotype of what an artist looks like. And then a lot of people kind of doing it ironically, or like, haha, like, I know I'm trash, or like, I'm heartbroken, but I'm gonna put it on stage, that kind of thing, which I personally don't agree with. I know that art is an expression for the things you're going through, the life experiences you have, but I don't believe you need to go through trauma or put yourself through trauma to be a good artist.
Right.
And I want to make that very clear. I don't think that art has to be associated with dysfunction. It's a weird thing also of like, oh, who's in more pain, who can cry harder, especially in acting school, where it's a weird competitive thing of like who can feel more or who doesn't feel anything at all. And I think that the more you just focus on yourself and understand your own feelings, how your emotions work, things will change radically.
Right, because that way, you know, at the end of the day, outside of off stage, like you're still like a holistic person. You can relax, because oftentimes, from my experience as well, seeing people who take the stage, take art overboard. They go really all in. They put themselves in there. It's like you really put yourself into a place of risk where, you know, whenever you're in those down parts of your life, there's like, if your art isn't going well, then your life outside of that isn't going well. It's just like, it can get real. It can that depression, that anxiety can really kind of snowball and put people into really like kind of a dark place.
Yeah.
And so it's like having that separation is important, because there's no way that we're truly going to be able to authentically emulate tragedy to the degree that art is written in the parts. Like, I hope for the most part that people playing some of the parts where they witness like a close one dying, or pulling the whole Romeo and Juliet kind of thing when you're acting in that kind of like hardcore drama scene, no one's gonna really know what it's like to like lose somebody by literal death and then kill yourself. So it's like from going to the extreme. So if you want to go to the extreme, it's kind of impossible, because you're truly never gonna be able to go 100% authentic.
There's a distinction between going all in and being consumed.
Yeah, that's precisely it.
I believe in hard work. I believe in giving yourself to your craft, to your art. I just think, and it takes some time to figure out what your boundaries, what your limits are, like I said before, but knowing how much you can take mentally and physically, which is something I spent a lot of time doing in school, just because I trained under physical theater and experimental theater practice, where a lot of it was like, oh, like, what does my body do?
Right.
Oh, this makes me cry, like that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you can put your suffering into your work, but it's not necessary. The things they don't go back and forth like that. The relationship is different. I believe a lot of good art has come from suffering, but I don't think it's necessary.
Absolutely. No, I totally just nailed it. It's such a great way with words.
I try.
So ChiWen, what are your goals? I know that's a very hard question,
Goals.
because the path, you know, it's not a straight path. But I guess like what would your, you know, where do you see yourself in the next upcoming years? Like what are you currently working towards? And like what's your dream goal? Like what would be, if everything worked out, what would that look like?
I think that now I have been an artist for long enough where I'm like, oh, I'm starting to see where like pieces are floating together. I think right now is also a crazy time to be an artist, because technology and also like so many things are changing, like diversity. There's a lot of momentum to make things, and with the political climate, a common way for artists to react is by creating work. I personally, right now, when I moved to New York, I was like, oh, I just want to be able to perform, ideally make a living off of it. Right now, I work in a coffee shop as my day job, because I also enjoy working in coffee. At first, I thought it was going to be a thing just to pay the bills, but it became a thing. I found a similar joy in it that I find in theater, which is interacting with people, engaging with people, getting to share stories and have that same, the moments, exchanging moments thing is very precious to me. I think that one of my goals, oh boy, one of my goals is to be performing for as long as I'm physically able to.
Mm-hmm.
That actually sounds insane. No. I would eventually like to write my own work. Mm-hmm. I would like to choreograph my own work. I call myself a dancer, but I'm not classically trained. It's something I discovered that I enjoyed and felt good to me when I was in school. I do a lot of movement, improvisational work. Mm-hmm. It has allowed me to explore a lot of things that I didn't realize I had going on in my brain and in my body, just because I used to be a very shy, like, mouse person. I was like not taking up space, and now I'm like, how much space can I take up? If I say this out loud, it's on camera forever. I think I would eventually like to have my own company. I don't know if this exists in America. I don't know if it exists in Asia, because having grown up in both places, there is still the, like, seesaw, teeter-totting?
Yeah.
Teetering?
Teeter-tot? Just that.
What is that? The balance of where do I fit in, or is it better not to, because I can show more people this thing because they've never seen it or experienced it. I want to create work that moves people. It doesn't have to make them happy, but I would like them to, I want to create work that stirs something in people. Even if it's not something they can totally relate to, something that makes them think. Ideally, a little bit entertained. I don't want people to be miserable when they watch my work. Work that ignites conversation, and not work that prescribes answers or solutions. This is a lot of, I'm just thinking
ideas.
now,
Yeah,
like a lot of ideas. There's so many different things that can be created. Not that everything I do right now fulfills all of these categories. I now feel a little more responsible about the type of work I'm putting out into the world than I did when I first got to school, or moved to New York. I don't think that everything has to be mind-blowing or like groundbreaking. If it makes one person feel something, I'm like, nice. Did it.
No, a huge amount of respect and admiration to that, because I think that's important. Like, I'm a big advocate for that kind of art, that kind of something that actually says something, not just entertainment, superficial, because it's not, not to knock that kind of music, we get a lot of that, yeah. But I think one of the things that's kind of lacked in more the contemporary side of things is just things that make genuine and true commentary. I think that's just it's not as mainstream or even sub-mainstream, because it's like, I don't think that'll ever reach the kind of prominence that I think we'd all hope, but I think striving for that is still important. Yeah. But it's like, it's a very admirable path, and I just wish all the luck to you, and
thanks.
Everybody make sure to support the crap out of ChiWen, because it's like,
support me. should I start like a GoFundMe?
Yeah, GoFundMe.
Just for my life.
Yeah, kickstart my life or something like that. But
my Venmo handle is no.
Wow, time sure does fly. Thank you.
Only when you're having fun.
Only when you're having fun. Thank you so much for spending, part of your day with us here over this nice cup of coffee. Really appreciate having you here, ChiWen. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. And
thank you.
The conversation never ends, and nor do we want it to end. So please reach out to either of us. Socials are, of course, in the description below. Point down. That's what YouTubers do. Like, subscribe, tell a friend, share with somebody. We really work hard to like formulate these thoughts and trying to deliver an important message, and we really appreciate your open ears. So let's get this message heard, and thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you. And my signature goodbye, I guess, until next time. Peace.